This is BJJ Hood, tapping into Jiu-Jitsu lives on and off the mats.
Hello, we are back. This is the BJJ Hood podcast. I'm Babi, your host.
And I'm Shae, your co-host.
We're here to share inspirational stories about women in Jiu-Jitsu and how the martial art changed their lives. Today with us, we have Alison Capra. She's a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, author, producer, and she started her first business when she was only 19. And man, she never stopped hustling. I know she has like a lot of stories. We're going to talk about it today, but I wanted to welcome you to the BJJ Hood podcast, Alison.
Hi, thank you.
Of course. So the first question we ask everybody is like, how did Jiu-Jitsu came up to your life? How did you start it?
Well, you know what? Honestly, it's kind of interesting. I came from a wrestling family. So like my dad wrestled. My dad was competitively wrestling into his late 30s. And a coach, my brother, my cousins, we had like national champions in our family. So like everything, I was around wrestling my whole childhood. But in the late 80s, early 90s, girls weren't really wrestling. It wasn't really a thing. There was like one or two girls at kids club that were kind of out there, and they were like fierce little creatures, but they had like t-shirts tucked into their singlets because they didn't have girls singlets yet and things like that. I remember actually in USA Wrestling magazine, the first time they put a female in there with a like female singlet. And I'm like, I tore it out and I like had it on my wall because I wanted to wrestle so bad. And my mom wouldn't let me, and then moving into high school, there was no girls wrestling teams. And there was really no, maybe one or two here and there you'd find girls wrestling. So I was the wrestling manager in high school, like, stat girl or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Too. Yeah, I couldn't do it either. They were like, nope, it's not going to happen, but you could be a manager.
Yeah, you want to come hang out with the guys and pick up their stuff. So we did that. My brother transitioned from wrestling to jiu-jitsu in his 30s. And he invited me for the first time, 2019, to come to classes with him. I came, I loved it. But I got pregnant like right after, like a month later. So I took that time, had my kiddo, and 6 months postpartum was like, I'm going to kick it back off and start jiu-jitsu. So that's kind of when I started, was 6 months postpartum. I was 36 at the time. And I remember my first class, I thought I was going to die. It's like, people are just like, I think at one point I was face down, like belly down in the mat, completely like prone. And this girl was just choking the shit out of me. Like, it was so bad. And I remember leaving there like kind of traumatized, but then I was like, I want to do it again. Like, I can't wait to go back,
Yeah.
So
isn't that funny that like you get to that position, you get in a situation where like, what am I even doing here? This girl is like mounted on my back. I have no way to like get out of here, and I want to come back.
And we didn't have like, at the time, there really wasn't a ladies program yet. And there wasn't like a fundamentals like onboarding process. So like, I don't know if some gyms have that or not. We just didn't. It's kind of like you come in and you come get started. So like, that you go and you have no idea what you're doing. And if you're at like, if you're having like anybody roll with you that's like, doesn't really feel like they have like the explanations for anything, you're just getting like, so every time now when new people come, especially women, I like try to like, hey, come here. Like, let me explain what's about to happen to you.
That's funny. Yeah. In Brazil, they used to call that like a shark tank. There are some gyms that are like that. It's just, you're getting thrown in there, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. Figure it out. Sometimes that is not even like classes that are being taught. It's just, you just train and you start learning as you go. And that for me, it's crazy because I mean, it's so much easier for you to get hurt, and it's so much harder for you to like it because there's like no structure at all. Like, imagine you came from a background already of wrestlers that like you kind of understood a little bit what was going on, and maybe like you kind of expected a little bit to maybe be pinned or whatever was happening to you. But imagine if you didn't, and you just became a mom, and you're 36 years old, and you're like, why am I going to put myself in this situation? Like, it doesn't make any sense for me to be here. Like, I'm never going to learn this. I think that's the first feeling that we have when we start. It's just like, I can never be like this person. Like I will never get to this point. And if you have a little bit more structure and like people are like kind of teaching you, you kind of know what to expect. Or right now when the girls come and they have you there to be like, come here, I'll put you under my wing and I'll show you a little bit more and give you a little bit more of information. I think that helps a lot. Have you ever had the chance to do wrestling after, since you didn't have that chance when you were younger?
Well, I will say this, no-gi is really where it's at for me. So in a lot of ways, we have a lot of wrestling technique that we work on and stuff in no-gi classes. And so when I can, like, that's like where I try to be is in the no-gi realm, but our gym offers more gi training, which it's good for me because I need to work on it and I need to practice being more technical and all that. But I do get to kind of, work a lot of grappling principles with just the no-gi experience, So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I do like to, I think the one thing that's for me, like kind of the bigger differences are like the leverage points, with jiu-jitsu that you don't really have with wrestling. And so that's been like crucial for women, obviously. And for anybody is like a smaller person, you have to get there if you want to succeed, right? You have to get to leverage. Otherwise somebody's just going to smash the shit out of you for a whole round,
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. We were talking to Jasmine yesterday, Jasmine Rocha, and she was talking about it. Like jiu-jitsu is a nerd sport. Like you kind of like study a little more. And as I like meet more people and I talk to more people, it's so real because I never thought about, for example, of the details of like leverage in positions and stuff like that. And then if you hear, I think it's Brianna St. Marie, that she's always talking about it, like how interesting is to study all these little details and like go into that and how much you can grow your jiu-jitsu when you understand all those information. So it's pretty cool to see like this other side, the nerd side of jiu-jitsu that is not like talked about a lot in the sport. Like it's so much talked about the roughness of it, but not that much about the nerd side. So it's pretty cool.
I know. I feel like the longer that I go, the more I'm like, I just want to be like a nerd, like this totally nerd out on all this like really technical stuff because it's so much. You realize early on, right, through your white belt career that you're going to get gassed if you don't like learn how to conserve energy. And if you're just like coming in hot all the time, which I always was, then you're going to be the one that's just like by like 3 minutes, so it's like you have to learn to conserve energy. You have to learn how to be smart, so that's what's kind of cool about growing in jiu-jitsu. You like every time you get further along, you like I knew nothing. I know nothing. I know even less than I thought I knew.
There's a lot of black belts that we talk to that they say like once they get to black belt, they felt like at that point in time, like they knew everything, they're ready for the black belt, and then they get their black belt and then they're like, I'm restarting all over. Like I had no idea what I didn't know. And that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my friend about this because I just like it so much. I don't know if you guys follow Tom DeBlas, but he made a post yesterday talking about how wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the US right now for females. So, we kind of talk about this a lot because it's like, I started at 36 years old and I'm a blue belt. So, like let's throw 10 years on that or whatever. And it's like when I'm in my 40s, if I get to black belt or whatever, then all these young chicks that started wrestling in high school in the last 10 years are going to be right there at black belt. You know what I mean? Like ready to just smash me.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's interesting to think about, like you get to black belt and you think like, oh, I made it. It's like, no, dude, people like now
is the problem.
Now there's people that have been waiting for you there that have been a black belt longer than you've been doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's what I was telling. I was talking to my therapist actually this week, and I was talking to her. I'm a brown belt, so my husband is the one that normally gives me the bouts and like that knows the time that I'm supposed to get my bouts, and he keeps saying that, and it freaks me out every time he does. He's like, "You're getting closer to get your black belt. Like, you better like try to work on this because this is not good yet. Try to work on that and stuff like that." And I'm like, I want to I like to compete, and I was telling her, I was like, I really want to compete more. Like, I want to have more, the most I can of experiences in my brown belt before I go to black. Because when you get there, everybody else is there. And everybody else is coming there. Like, people are not leaving, going to a different, like, there's no other place to go after that. Everybody's staying there. So it just gets harder and harder. And like, right now I'm going to be 33 this year. So I'm masters, thank God. But still, a lot of the adults world champions are starting to move to master one. And I'm like, I'm going to be right there. Like, I don't want to be there. I'm like, I want to stay where I am right now for a little longer, because I'm scared what's gonna happen when all these people start moving to the master division.
Oh
Yeah.
my
And
God.
when I was a blue belt, when I right when I moved here to the US, I was still adult and I would compete, but I was like what, like maybe like 27, 28, and I was like, what am I even doing here? They would put this like orange belts and green belts in my division as blue belt, and they would like crush me. Like, there was no way I was surviving to that. And I was like, that's so embarrassing. A kid is beating me up. But like, that kid is a black belt wearing a freaking like orange belt in their waist. Is like, I can't compare myself to that. Like, there's no way I'm gonna have that same level of energy, of bendiness, of like everything that they do. I'm like,
Yep.
I just can't. There's nowhere to go for me there. So kind of, I was like so happy the year I turned 30. I'm like, yes, finally. now I can kind of compete with people that are kind of like where I am right now. So
Yes.
it's pretty funny to think about that, and especially as you get to the black belt, because I think that's where things starts to go crazy. Yeah. So I was gonna ask you, like, what are the things that you took from jiu-jitsu to your personal life? Like, how did that change your life? We were talking even before we started recording how you had to let go of a bunch of other hobbies to like pretty much to do jiu-jitsu because you love that so much.
Yeah, I didn't have to let go of all the other hobbies. I just was like, get rid of all these other hobbies. This is where it's at for me, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, really, I, was pretty, heavy when I started. So I just had a baby, right? So it's like I was heavy, but I was heavier than normal before I got pregnant. So I was just like not in a great space. I was probably like, for the most part, I would say just sort of, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I was like necessarily stuck in life, but I definitely was at a place where it was like I wasn't disciplined, and I was definitely living more for like enjoyment and pleasure than purpose, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And right, really I could say it's jujitsu, but the truth is like the reason why it was jujitsu is because I had my son. I had my son at 35, and as my first kid. I had raised my stepsons with a previous marriage, but this is my first biological kid, and so I had him at 35, and it definitely shifted my whole brain, because it's like suddenly you go from thinking about you don't really care if you live or die, you're just here to have a good time, everything's cool, right? Like everything's fun, I'm enjoying life, to like, oh my gosh, like I'm completely responsible for this life and making sure that he has the best life, and that he's great, and I got to protect him, and I don't know like where you guys are at, if you have kids or whatever, but it's just like this switch flipped in my brain where it was like I constantly was suddenly like thinking all the time about like, I'm going to have to murder somebody today because they're getting too close to my baby. Like, you know what I mean? Like suddenly this whole like sensation took over of like, I would start, and it was not me. Like I suddenly was like, just always thinking about the things that I would need to do to like get out of a bad position if somebody put me in a bad position and I had my kid with me, or like just if somebody was like looking at me funny, I was like, are they going to try to take my kid? It's just like this like weird little thoughts. And I was like, it was like violence all the time. So I wanted to do something obviously to lose weight, but I also was like, I think I need to figure out some self-defense. So jiu-jitsu for me was really, obviously I grew up in that wrestling family, but the reason I really wanted to focus on it is because I wanted to make sure that I could be the best version of myself to serve my family and to protect my son. And I'm married and everything, and my husband is special operations veteran. So like he's very dangerous. That's cool, but like he's not always with me. You know what I mean? So it's like I started to think more along the lines of, if something happened, am I physically fit enough to go the distance and like get out of danger? Or if something happened and somebody did try to take my kid, which there was like a situation like here locally where some guy, like a lady, put her baby in the car seat, and by the time she walked around the car, some dude came and pulled the baby out of the car seat and took off with it, like locally.
That's crazy.
Right. And they found him and everything, but still it's just like that kind of stuff is like, okay. So I was like, I have got to get dangerous. Like I want to be dangerous because like, you can't predict what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. And you can't obviously like be afraid that all the time that something bad's going to happen to you, but I damn sure can be prepared if something bad is going to happen to me. And this idea that like women think they're going to bench press a car because of adrenaline or something, or like be able to like, oh, I would never let that happen. I my adrenaline would kick in and my mom instincts, and I would just, like fight off an attacker and turn into like She-Hulk or whatever. It's like, for those of you who do BJJ, you know what it feels like to train under like pressure and stress, right? And you know how hard it is to train under pressure and stress when you're tired. And when you're competing and you add the element of like, like an explosive takedown or something like that, somebody completely, I had this one chick, oh my God. I had this one chick that was like a heavyweight and we were in absolute, and she jumped guard on me. And I was like, and I had underhooks. So we were standing and had underhooks, and she just like grabbed me and threw me on top of her. And just the shock of that for like a solid 5-7 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, think if somebody did that to you, like in a real life situation with your kid present, and like it would take you a couple seconds just to even figure out what the hell happened. Then respond. And then your adrenaline's going through the roof, and you're trying to control your movements and control someone else's movements and close distance and all this different stuff. So I just wanted to put myself in the best possible situation to where if I was attacked or in a situation where I had to run, that I was the healthiest and fittest I could possibly be to give myself a chance, right? Obviously, somebody could pull a gun on me. Obviously, somebody could pull a knife on me, and that would be a different situation. But you better believe that at this point, after 3.5 years of training, that I know at least one or two things that under stress I could use to get away.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't understand that, because it's funny, like, especially if you post or if you see any posts of self-defense, for example, people are like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that to me, or like you wouldn't be able to use it. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. Like, even if you compare yourself to when you were first day white belt, what did you know? Like, what would you be able to do when somebody did all those things? Like grabbed you, maybe underhooked you, tried to take you down. You wouldn't do anything. Like for me, I would just freeze and be exactly like you said, like, what the heck just happened to me? I don't know. Maybe I will just do this so you don't hit my face, but there's not much I could do right now. Maybe I won't be able to like really get out of a bad situation, but now I have all the chances that I can, because if you use me with all the chances that I can, and I might be able to get out, but if the person, like you said, pull a gun, pull a knife, nobody will be able to get out unless you also have a gun or a knife and you guys can fight as equals.
And you know how to disarm a person very well.
And that's really hard. That's like really, really hard. I think even if you try to teach, for example, some martial arts try to teach you how to disarm somebody, I would never try to do that, because the chances of them trying to stab me and getting like really stabbing me would be way higher than me trying to take that knife from them. So a lot of people don't understand that if you are already in a bad situation, you have to have some tools to at least try to get out. It doesn't mean that you will. It doesn't mean that you're going to succeed, but at least you're trying. You're not just laying there waiting for the worst, you know? So I think that's the most important part of jiu-jitsu for women, especially. It's like giving you that sense of, I can still try to do something. And the other thing, it's like, and that's the thing that I feel that happens here in America for a lot of people. You guys have a bigger sense of security, just because it is more secure in most places. For me, for example, coming from Brazil, I'm always aware. Like, if somebody looks funny at me, I'm already like, where am I gonna run? Like, I'm already making my escape in my mind. Where am I gonna run? What does this guy want? Like, why is he looking at me? I'm gonna get out of here. Like, I'm not staying in this place. It's like everywhere. So having that awareness, and I think jiu-jitsu brings that to you too, because you're always under pressure. It's consistent. Somebody is on top of you, somebody's trying to choke you, somebody's trying to break your arm. Like, you're always have to think about all those possibilities and move as you think. It gives you that sense of awareness that a lot of people don't have. Like you said, just this case of this woman putting her baby in my brain. The first thing is, if I put my baby in my car, I'm going to try to lock the door before I even close. So if somebody comes around, the door is locked. They won't be able to get in. If I go to the gas station and I have to like get out of my car to pump gas, I'm locking all the doors in my car, because I've seen cases of people that just go and somebody just jump their windows, steal their cars. That's it. It's gone.
Yep.
So just like little details of things that you can do that a lot of people don't think about. And I think when you start doing jiu-jitsu and you start understanding all those like situations, stressful situations that you can be put in, that's when things start, like your brain starts to open and you start seeing things differently. So I love that, like that sense that jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
gives to most people.
And even just your own, like, I don't know the word, staging, if that makes any sense. Like the way that you place your body to the door, you know, the way that you take a break to look at your phone. Like, you know, at the airport, like if I'm not going to be looking down at my phone as I'm walking, I'm not going to be just like standing there openly for no, I mean, and, you know, airports are safe, but like,
Yeah.
I'm going to back up to a wall and make sure that like nobody's coming up from behind me, you know,
Yeah.
when I'm going to look at my phone or whatever it may be, just like how you sit, how you position yourself. I mean, honestly, like I'm not in a stance all the time, you know what I mean? But I could get there pretty quick. You know what I mean? I could get to like at least like a little bit of like to keep my feet from being like swung up from under me. I'm not going to be like an idiot about the way that I'm standing, anything like that. I feel like jiu-jitsu gives you a lot of like things to think about with your own personal safety and security and that of, you know, your family. And so overall, I lost probably, well, all in all, like I think 50 pounds.
Wow.
Doing jujitsu and weight training, and like I've gained and lost muscle since then. So I say like right now I'm probably 40 pounds down from the weight that I started. So ultimately, jujitsu makes you look really good naked, I would say. I feel like that almost every female that trains at our gym looks phenomenal, extremely fit. And so that was a big thing for me, you know, just getting in shape. And again, all came back to me just wanting to make sure I'm dangerous and I don't have a bunch of extra body fat for no reason.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it gave me a lot more confidence in myself and my abilities, because I think people go through life thinking of themselves a certain way, you know, and like for me, I kind of always saw myself as, whether it was a story I told myself, a narrative I kind of told myself, or a narrative that maybe like people talked about me or had about me growing up, I was always kind of just like this fun time girl. Like I'm fun, I like to party, I like to, you know, go out. I'm always like, so like most of my friends who knew me, that's kind of how they knew me. Like I was always down to go out for drinks, and I just didn't have a real disciplined life. And so I think making that switch with having my son and wanting to be more disciplined, jiu-jitsu gave me like discipline and like a really, really real plan of kind of how I spend my life, which is like get up first thing in the morning, go to jiu-jitsu immediately, get home, do an ice bath, start eating my macros, staying on track with so many things because I want to be the best version of myself and I want to be better at jiu-jitsu. So it gave me discipline ultimately, and it helped me to see what I was capable of when maybe I didn't know what I was capable of, like thinking I was just this fun person and I wasn't really like an athlete. Like even the word when people said like athlete, I was like, oh God, come on. You know what I mean? Like, sure.
It's scary, right?
Right.
It's a little scary.
Right. And, now at 39, competing in a sport for the first time that I learned starting at 36 sounds like, what? Like if you would have told me that you're going to start at 35, 36 years old, and then you're going to be competing in it. I never would have even, I would have been like, you're crazy. Because I think honestly at that time, I really kind of thought I was done with physical stuff. Really. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm old, whatever. You're only old because you treat yourself like you're old.
Exactly. 30s, 40s, it's not even old, especially nowadays, as you see, like, I see people at the gym, and I'm sure they're over like 60, sometimes 70, and they look better than me, to be honest. Like, they're pretty fit, they're pretty strong, and I'm like, that's what we want to be like. I want to be like them. And even though I might feel a little old, like, I'm not old. I have 30 years to work on my body, on my strength, on my jiu-jitsu, to be at 60 or 70 like this woman that I'm seeing right now, all like strong and pretty. Like, I'm sure she can walk around, she can squat, she can do stuff at her house by herself and not need anybody's help. I think we always go back to that mind of like, maybe 20, 30 years ago, where people on their 50s, they were already old. They were like, they couldn't do much. So I think a lot of things changed. We're not old. We can do a lot. We can start at 40 if we want. And that was something that I wanted to ask you, because I feel especially people that are like women that just had kids, they keep like postponing their own lives and their own like mental well-being, if I can say like that. I'm like, no, I don't have time for this right now. I have my kid out. Like, I don't have time to do jiu-jitsu, for example. I won't have time to go to the gym or whatever. Or like, I'm not fit enough to start jiu-jitsu because I just had a baby. And a lot of them don't understand that's like, this is the place for you to get fit. Like, you're going to get fit as you grow here. It's not like you have to get fit and then come back here. That might never happen. Just like, go with it.
Hi, Babi here, interrupting my own podcast just to ask you for a favor. If you are liking this episode, make sure you hit that like button and the follow if you don't follow us yet. We are on your favorite podcast platforms, and we're also on YouTube with subtitles in Portuguese, so you can see our faces there. If at the end of this episode you think a friend might learn something from us today too, make sure you hit that share button. That's really, really important for us to keep getting to more people and to start bringing more people here to the podcast. If you don't follow us on social media yet, we are on Instagram and TikTok as BJJ Hood Podcast. So make sure you're following us there, leaving comments and suggestions for us. I'll let you to continue with this episode.
So what was that feeling, like that experience for you, being like a brand new mom coming into that gym and starting jiu-jitsu? And what would be your advices for those women that are in this situation right now that maybe are pregnant or just had a baby, that think about starting jiu-jitsu but are scared or are thinking of themselves of, I'm too old, I'm not going to start that?
Well, I will say this, it's definitely an uphill thing. Like if you just had a baby, for instance, like I started 6 months postpartum and I was still breastfeeding and I was still like, not to be like gross or whatever, but I was still not, my pelvic floor was not fully healed and ready to rock. Right. So I was doing things like probably before I thought I was ready, but really, truly, that's what took me through it. That's what took me through it to where, like, again, and this is I'm not trying to give anybody a hard time about anything, but I'll tell you this. so many women joke about like having issues with incontinence and they don't want to do. I've had people tell me they can't jump on a trampoline or they can't work out and do certain things because they can't, since they've had babies and, it's super hard on them. And I have actually had friends who, in jiu-jitsu are like, I just can't because I just can like control my bladder, da, da, da. So one thing I'll say is that part can be very challenging if you're coming back into something, or if you've never done just sport like jiu-jitsu and you're just getting going, you have to work to recover your core and you have to work to recover your pelvic floor. And it is challenging, but I'll tell you this, it's like, because I did that, because I was like, okay, I need to fix this problem. I need to make sure that my pelvic floor is healed. I need to make sure that my abs and my core are healed and that I didn't, do any damage. And I need to work on that consistently. I went through and got a course where it was prenatal and postpartum fitness coaching. And I got certified in that because I wanted to learn how to fix it and make sure that it was like healed and whole and better. And then I put the work in consistently, like every day. Every day I spent time working on my pelvic floor. Every day I spent time working on my core on top of jiu-jitsu. So like it's not like I said, you can completely like heal your body and get through a lot of those like maybe reasons or excuses that you have for not starting if it has to do with your physical body. There's things you can do to work through those. There's programs, there's all kinds of stuff. And it's like you put in that extra time and the jiu-jitsu is only going to help you even more because it's like so much core work and so much like it really is so much work with your whole like pelvic floor, everything. You're working through so much. So it made me stronger. I became in better shape than I ever have been in my life. And so I would say to like any woman that's getting started, if you just start, if you just keep showing up, once I got going at our jiu-jitsu gym, they did put together a female women's program and it was like exceptional. We had a coach that worked specifically with us. I spent probably 6 weeks only training with females just so that I felt real comfortable about what I was doing at that point. And then once I felt comfortable with that, I started training co-ed and with whoever, whenever, and just kept showing up all the time. And it's like, it happened organically, but it didn't, like I put the work in every single day. So it's like I was working, but it's like it was so gradual that like I could see like night and day difference in my body and in not just my physique, but in like my overall like core and my pelvic floor, in my hips and my flexibility, things that are like you wouldn't expect to happen when you're over 35. Or like it was like I was reversing the aging process because I started to like really work on the things that I wasn't working on before that.
Yeah. And I think that's like, it's really important when you say that of like, you have to put the work because it doesn't help just on your jiu-jitsu. And I think even if you don't do jiu-jitsu, you have to put that work for yourself because from what you said, a lot of women that can't even jump because they have a weak pelvic floor, that's not good for you. You have to like work out those muscles so you are able to live a normal life. If you don't do jiu-jitsu, you have to like run maybe to catch your kid. You might be able to run or jump to like play with your kid. And then like you're not going to do that just because you don't want to like do that workout, So it's like do that for yourself. Think about yourself and about your family and your kids because that's when you're going to be able to do things for them, or you're going to stop doing a bunch of stuff just because your body can't move.
Exactly.
And then I think the longest you leave that going, the worse it's going to be. So as soon as you are able, like by your doctor, that you are able to exercise and do stuff, like start doing. I believe I never had a kid, but excuse me. I believe it's hard work. Just from like going to the gym every day, it is hard work. It's not easy. I don't want to be there every single day, but you just go because you have to keep your body moving. You have to be safe and healthy with your muscles and everything. I think it's the same for after you have a kid. Like you have to do that workout just so you're able to live a normal life after that.
100%.
You're talking
self-love, really. I mean, the real and truest form of self-love is like really taking care of your body, which means discipline. And a lot of people don't want, especially women, want to, because I think they sort of feel like, well, I've had this hard day and I've had this like long work schedule, you know, I work full time and I have a kid and we've got so much going on and we travel a lot. We have a lot of work to do all the time because we own multiple businesses. So I get it. But it's like that idea that like your self-love is having wine at the end of the day to unwind and just kind of pour yourself into the night and just have to like chill and watch TV is like, that's not self-love. It's not even really self-care. You know what I mean? Like self-love, self-care is discipline and treating your body like it needs to be treated, which means training and eating correctly and eating your macros and drinking lots of water and getting lots of sleep.
Yes, I agree 100%. We're talking about, you talked a little bit about that, of like when you started jiu-jitsu, that you tried to work more with the women and then slowly went into the co-ed classes and stuff. I saw one of your Instagram posts recently and I actually made a video about it on my personal Instagram. And my post was me giving some tips for men while they were training with women. It's funny because it gets a lot of comments and people go all crazy about all the stuff and like, stop whining. Why? Like, men should just roll with women the same way. And like, my personal opinion, it's like, I'm a brown belt, right? I could roll with a white belt the same way that I roll with a brown belt and crush them and not make it any fun or any interesting, or they won't learn anything just because I'm just crushing them all the time, just because they can. Or I could try to roll with them, giving them opportunities to learn and to move and to do stuff and go somewhere from there, right? That's the same way I think about a man training with a woman. If you're stronger than her, if you're bigger than her, start working on your jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu. It doesn't matter if you're stronger or not. But if you don't have jiu-jitsu, you're going to appeal for your strength. And if you're stronger than me, you might win because I might not be able to even move you if you're 250-pound man, right? So it's like, what would you think that are the most important things that like for men need to be aware of when they're training with women, and also for the women too, like when we're choosing our partners and like deciding that we want to, because I think it is really important, and I think every woman should train with men. They're my favorite training partners. That's when I can use all my strength and not be scared of hurting them. I don't really care if they get hurt, they get hurt. Like, they're stronger than me. They can stop it a little. But it's like, I also think that for us, we have to choose well. There are people that I won't go with that I don't think that are good partners for me. And then I know already how to choose. Like, what would be your advices too for men's training with women, and also for the women to choose their partners?
So I think the biggest thing is like, ultimately, you know, you are responsible for you, right? So like putting your own boundaries in place, because just because you have some idea of how things should go doesn't mean that anyone else sees it that way. So like, just because you go into a role and say, hey, go easy on me, and then somebody's like going hard on you, like a guy just comes and smashes, it's like, maybe he thought he was going easy. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, it's really hard in jiu-jitsu to learn that. I'm still learning that, like how to kind of gauge like where I'm at and if I should take it easy one day or be, you know, better about that. So I think the biggest thing is just getting to know people in your gym and taking the time. Like, I don't typically train with men that I don't know. When we go to travel in different gyms and stuff like that, I will, especially because my husband and I train together most places when we travel, I will wait till he trains with him first. And then if he gives me like a no or a yes, then I'll kind of like look at him and see that. When I first started at our gym, like I said, we didn't really have like a full-blown women's program in place. But once we did, it's like, it was awesome. It was so exciting to get to like, you know, be with women and learn and do jiu-jitsu hard with each other. But then once we like would go out there and try to train with guys, we had to like really kind of get our wits about us. Like, you know, how do we gauge if we should or shouldn't roll with somebody? And so in the beginning, I would just kind of go to my coach and say like, who's this? Is this person good? And he would say, this person, yes, this person, no. And typically I found that, I mean, it's not always the case, but for the most part, guys that were married and had kids were a lot smarter about that kind of thing. If they came in to train with you, they were aware that you're a female, and even if you have a good amount of technique, you're much, essentially weaker than they are, and they can't just toss you around and like a rag doll. So
Yes.
that's probably number one. Is I typically don't train with men. I don't know the times that I have, because I've tried to be like, somebody was like, I felt bad. I didn't want to be like that person. I'm like, no, so I like did. I've gotten hurt. So like anytime I didn't listen into my own role, right?
Yes.
The second thing is, and this is maybe not all women are different, right? So I'm pretty aggressive, and I feel like I can be pretty aggressive with the guys because they can handle it, like you said. But I also would like notice that if I started a roll and I came in really hot, like that usually meant like, okay, they're going to match my energy. They're going to come in hot. Right.
Yeah.
So typically, just because I know, like, even if it's a guy that's just starting and he's like, doesn't really know a lot of technique, and maybe I could do something or catch him in something that he wasn't like aware of. No matter if that's the case, dude is bigger than me. He's going to be able, he could easily, like, we're playing by a set of rules. Jiu-Jitsu has got a set of rules. We're playing by those rules. And in those rules, it says that I can do this and I can do this and you can't defend it, or you do this and I do this and you can't defend it. Right? Yes. But if like we were in the streets, somebody was like, I just tried this thing on this guy, he like, you could just knock me out or like throw me. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very aware that all of the men that I roll with, even the ones that aren't very good, or maybe they're just like, don't know exactly what they're doing yet, could easily overpower me and easily like knock me out if they felt like it. Like it's a very, if you really think about it, it's a pretty vulnerable place to put yourself with another person. Like I'm coming into you to like play this puzzle game, and I'm hoping that I can trust you with my life essentially, or my elbow or my arm or whatever. So if I think about it that way and I don't put any ego with it, like I try to like at this point really just think about it like there's no ego, there's no nothing. This is me coming in and like being vulnerable with another person and their body and my body. And I try to think about it like I'm going to come in with a guy in a very like low key place and see how we start there. That way I can tell, like, because if I come in a low key place and it's like a decent person that I should be rolling with, they will stay that way with me the whole time.
Yes.
But if I come in hot, like, like they'll match that energy and they're bigger and stronger. So I'll get my ass smashed.
Yeah.
You know?
They kind of like gonna put you in your place, like, hey, slow down, like go back a step. Let's restart that.
Yes. So that I try to always kind of come in and just for a very like, I'm not going to turn this up because it doesn't really end well. And I mean, I have to do that with females sometimes too, just because, like, especially people when you're comp training, like if a person is constantly comp training and they're in that zone, like I know for myself, like when we're comp training at comp class and stuff like that, I'm going so much harder and so much like more fight in the game. So like I don't want to come into roles like that with women that are like extremely good because I'm like that doesn't end well for me either. So I think coming into like just a real like modest, like I'm just gonna be real like I don't even know the word. I'm just gonna be humble. There we go. I'm just gonna come into this in a humble place and let's get started and see where this goes.
I think it's like a slow build up of making it harder and harder as it goes. Like you don't have to start laying there like a dead fish, but it's also like you don't have to start like a tractor just like running over people. Try to start like normal, and then as it gets like more exciting and fired up, then you start like ramping that up. And you're both kind of like going at the same speed, right? Like slowly building that tension and everything.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you, like, what are your goals in jiu-jitsu? Like, where do you see yourself in the next years in the sport?
Oh man, well, ultimately, like right now, because I'm 39 and how often I train, I probably train 6 or 7 times a week. So because I train so much right now, the biggest thing is like staying really like preventative and healthy. Like I dislocated my shoulder back in January, and it's been a kind of a thing because then I trained for pans, and then that I went really hard, and like then it dislocated again, and so it's like I like am learning the recovery method of like going to a class and going hard, and then the next day going and just drilling, and then like just going to the next day and going maybe a little harder, and then taking 2 days to just drill, like that sort of thing. So I think ultimately I would love to go the distance, and I would love to be a black belt, and I would love to, go and go and go. And I would love to do this until I'm 60, or older. I just saw the other day all the women over 70 that are still competing in the sport. It's amazing. So I'm like, I want to get to the level where I am like so body aware and conscious that I can really recover well, stay healthy, stay active in the sport as long as humanly possible. Because for me, it's like even more about mental health than it is about physical health at this point.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I really do just want to help women with self-defense. I think that's probably like, for me, it's like such a, I've been robbed and held at gunpoint when I was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
And I've been in an abusive relationship before. And so like, I've been in situations where I was like physically being altercated with, and it feels so like helpless. You feel helpless. And like, I don't like women feeling like that, because they're not. Like, you are not helpless, and you're completely capable of taking control of your own health, well-being, family, and protecting them and serving them. Like, I mean, just even throughout history, if you really look at it, people think women are like these soft, fragile little creatures, but for the most part, they were hard, like very hard. Like women were holding down the fort when men were off at war. So like there's just a way stronger side, I think, than we allow ourselves to even tap into sometimes. And so for me, I would love to be able to just help women tap into their harder self that is there to serve and protect their family and themselves and being the healthiest version of themselves. And ultimately, like, whether it's just defending yourself in an altercation that happens in a parking lot or, jiu-jitsu. I would love to, at some point in the career of jiu-jitsu down the line, that I'm able to like help women with that piece.
Yeah, I love that. You were talking about like at some point too, how many business you guys have and like how busy you are. For people that have that same lifestyle as yours, of like a lot of things going on at the same time, how do you manage to be able to get your business side, everything done, your family time, your jiu-jitsu, your time for yourself? Like, any piece of advice that you would have for them? I know it's a hard one because you're probably like just like trying to figure it out as you go, like what you can do and what you can't. But
well, I know this. I really do think if we were really to break down someone's day, the amount of time they spend doing stupid shit would be like probably 3 or 4 hours. Like, if you really broke down anybody's day, we all have the same 24 hours. Maybe you have a lot more kids than I do, right? Whatever. But we all have the same 24 hours. And so like, for me, it has to be because like I get up and train at 5. Because if I don't get up and train at 5, I won't be able to train. It's like when I can train, right? So it's like making it to where you really do dig deeper and say, okay, what are my excuses? How many hours do I actually have in the day? Where can I make those excuses? Like, how, because if you go into it with like a limiting belief, like I don't have the time, right? And I'm like, I just don't have the time. Well, then you don't have the time, right? But if you come into it from a place of, how can I make time for this? How can I make this work? How can I do this? Because there's times where we'll have stuff going on. Like, let's say, Black Friday is our like busiest time of year. And then we do something where we do like, it's like a deal every day. We call it Slickmas. It's like 12 days of Christmas sales. And so like from the beginning of November to the end of December, we are just like, there is like not an hour in the day that we're not just cranking, right? It's super, super busy time. And so if I were to go, I just can't train right now. Well, then I wouldn't train.
Mm-hmm.
So instead I say, okay, well, when could I make it work? And so we'll pull the mats out and my husband and I will just get after it in the garage and drill and do what we can do. And, when we're traveling, we almost always go to gyms that we can like get in because, everybody's got a week pass and most gyms like let people just come train if they're traveling and coming through anyways. A lot of them have like a $20 whatever, but usually it's like, no, just come. You're coming through, just come in and say hi. Jiu-Jitsu people are like the best when it comes to like being warm and friendly and everything. So really just, I think it's more identifying your limiting beliefs of where, instead of asking yourself, or telling yourself you can't, you're asking yourself, how can you? Because I know for a fact that if I sat down with anybody who gave me their schedule, that we could find a spot for you to.
When you're talking, I'm like, that's almost like a slap on my face. I'm always like, I'm so busy, I can't do stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I spend a lot of time on my phone just like scrolling on Instagram. I could cut that down for sure and just add something else in there.
Right. And then the same thing with like, if you change your life, if this has meaning and value to you, then like your friends changed maybe. And maybe, you know what I mean? Because that's like one of the biggest things is like right now at our gym, I go to Crest in Eastern North Carolina. We're a Tom DeBlash gym. And at our gym, we have a female program that has 2 classes a week. And then we have like classes in the morning and classes in the evening. But really, there's at the women's program, every single one of the women at the program has some sort of job, right? They don't like whether they work from home or, they have a part-time position. They all have some sort of job. They all have kids. And so on ladies class days, there's probably 12 kids sometimes on like over in the corner playing. Like, so it's most gyms have like a very welcoming, open door, like family friendly policy, just because most jiu-jitsu gyms are like jiu-jitsu is for everyone. I mean, you might find like those competition gyms that just have like a ton of young people that are competing all the time, and that's kind of their focus. But for the most part, almost every gym I've ever been to, and I've been to gyms all over the US and overseas, and almost every, like, they're like, yes, put your kids over there, like, let them play, like, who cares? So it's like suddenly these excuses start to become like now we have answers for these kid. Everything's cool. Like there's a ton of women to try things on and train with. And it's like, that's what's so cool. I'm super thankful for our gym because now we're at that place where we do have like the women's program and there's so many kids classes. And, my friend and I, we teach toddler jujitsu play, which is super, super fun. It's like 3 to 5 year olds, and so they're just like, it's the cutest, and they got little tiny bees.
That's my favorite class. I keep telling my husband, I'm like, I don't want to teach teenagers. I don't want to teach anybody else. I would love to teach 3 to like 6 years old. Perfect. That's my group right there.
They're so freaking cute, and they're so freaking like excited about it. They love it. They haven't like gotten burnt out. Like it seems like a lot of the kids like in that 8 to 12 range are kind of like they kind of would rather be playing video games or something. They just like, don't really want to be there. So it's like, this is like that age where they're just excited that they get to come to something like that.
Yes.
And they're like soaking it up like a sponge. So it is pretty fun.
That's awesome. I was really curious because I was seeing on your Instagram about the book that you wrote, How Not to Be a Miserable Cow. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about it. Like, what is the book about? Like, what do you bring in there?
Yeah. So How Not to Be a Miserable Cow. It's called A Gypsy's Guide to Happiness, basically. Right. So essentially, it's almost everything we've been talking about, how, most women in our country and in our culture and some other cultures as well, but especially our culture, because we're entitled and we're given so much so young, and everything is pretty much like comfortable from the get-go. You come out and you're content. Somebody hands you like a bottle or a tit and you're comfortable for the like the next 20 years. I mean, really, truly, like there's not much hardship here. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen like with families and things like that. But like, as far as like your felt needs, food, clean water, like comfortable house with air conditioning, education, like we have so much. So we really do truly get this entitlement. And I think that kind of can lead us down a road of discontentment. And then we kind of shift gears to where like women are like more and more becoming depressed or having tons of anxiety and just feeling like a sense of like hopelessness or frustration, like because maybe they put their whole like their husband and their kids before themselves, so like they just are putting their own needs on the back burner over and over and over again, and ultimately they just are kind of lost, like because they don't really know, maybe one, like why they're miserable, or maybe they do know why they're miserable but they just can't get past something. So ultimately, it's kind of like challenging women to figure out like, okay, if you're miserable, is it maybe your own fault? You know, what are the reasons and what are the things that you can do to take ownership of your own life to change it so that you're not miserable? So I think that's kind of like, I mean, most women probably deal with that at some point in their lives. I know I did. And I ultimately had to come to the conclusion that I was responsible for my own happiness. No one else was responsible for that. And I'm not a victim, right? So like if you take away this, like this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, sure. But I'm not a victim of that. I'm going to take my both growth, recovery, health. I'm going to take the traumas. I'm going to deal with them. I'm going to work through this stuff and I'm going to get to the other side. Like we see it all the time, right? Like women who maybe like a husband cheated on them or left them or something, and they just stay in this, and there's jokes about it. Like they just get 50 cats and they just like turn into this creature, right?
Yes.
So it's like, this is just challenging you to go, okay, well, what do I want out of life? How can I let this thing go? How can I move on and not be a miserable cow? What are the things that I want out of life? And I think for me, I always kind of like wanted where I'm at right now is something that I always wanted. And I always saw myself as like that person, the person that I am now. It's like, that's what I wanted, but I didn't know how to achieve it. And the truth is that I really couldn't figure out how to achieve it until I dealt with all my shit. And you really do. You have to walk through your own stuff and you have to deal with addressing some things and some core beliefs and some limiting beliefs and start to see yourself differently and work through it all in order to kind of like see the light at the end of the tunnel and see that you are capable of getting to be the best version of yourself. You are capable of all these things, but you have to take ownership of your life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what How Not to Be a Miserable Cow is about.
I love it. When you're talking about it, it's always like what my therapist says. She's like, it's all on you. Like you can't just keep finding people to blame for the things.
Or
it's
rescue
yourself. Nobody's gonna come. It's you. Like you have to do it. It's for yourself. Nobody cares. It's like, yeah, but that person didn't give me a pat on my back and didn't say that I did a good job. It's like, it's your problem. Nobody's gonna come and do that. Do it for yourself. Good job, Babi. Yay, you did it. Keep going, because it's your life, it's your future. That's what you want. Just keep going for it. So,
Dude, exactly. Awesome. And that's really true. Like the biggest thing I think that I love about jiu-jitsu is like, I feel like it's just the most humbling thing that you can ever do for yourself. Yeah. You are just like humbled all the time. And just when you think you're maybe getting better, or just when you think you're like getting just a little bit like, oh yeah, I did good, it's like, you're just getting like humbled and humbled and humbled. Yeah. And the only way you're going to get better at those one things that you just suck at are by specifically working those things over and over. Right. Yes. So it's kind of the same thing, you know, with life and with what we're dealing with. And like, if you do not just carry this like humble, teachable attitude in life, if you're not willing to ask questions, if you think you've got it all figured out, but you're miserable, then like, where is there any room to grow? Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I constantly am like in jiu-jitsu, like just, I think it's cool to me because I know myself and I know how much it's changed me to where like I thought I was hot shit or something. You know what I mean? Like you kind of think you can fight until you fight.
Yeah.
You can't fight.
I'm like, oops. Nope.
You think you're hot shit and you're tough or whatever, and you just get
Yeah.
laid out and realize that you don't. So like throughout this whole last 3 years, it's just been me just realizing how much I had to learn in so many areas and learning it. And I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Alison, to finish, we like to, as the name of our podcast, it's BJJ Hood. So we always like to ask our guests, like, what this BJJ Hood means to you.
BJJ Hood. Well, I think BJJ Hood is like pretty awesome that you're getting like women to talk about things that they didn't maybe used to talk about. And you guys are like creating content that's centered around things that are for women that maybe don't care about makeup and hair and nails and or maybe you do, maybe you care about both. But I do
Yeah.
just love that there's so many women out there that are kind of like finding this new group and this new community of women in this circle that are more like them than they knew.
Yeah, that's amazing. Alison, thank you so much for taking the time for talking to us today and sitting with us, telling your story, giving some advices for our listeners. It was a pleasure to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. And for you that is watching this episode, make sure you share with a friend that might benefit from something that we talked about here today. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, YouTube with subtitles in Portuguese for all the interviews that come out every Thursday. And we're also on all the podcast platforms. So make sure you're following us so you don't miss any of the episodes. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Would you like to share your story? Email us at bjjhoodpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at bjjhoodpodcast.